taking action in anything in life forces momentum to create, right? And I talk about momentum so much because once you're in it, it gets completed. But if you never take that initial action to get going, you're just at a stalemate.
Hey, everybody. Here is your digital shark for this week's edition Within the Den. And I'm pretty juiced to have a new guest to the program, somebody that I recently met. And I first and foremost want to welcome, and he has this long-winded bio that you could throw out there: serial entrepreneur, social guru, digital marketing guru. And that's a unique situation for us to have somebody on that knows as much as we do from the digital marketing strategy, but we don't see it as a competition. We see it as a compliment to what's going on. So Judge Graham, I am pretty pumped to have you on the program today.
Well, thanks, man. I'm super excited to be here and appreciate you having me on.
No problem. So, I got a wide range of topics that I obviously want to bring up, but, one of the first things that I always like to do is get some rapid fire questions out of the way. So those that are in our audience that might not be familiar who Judge Graham is. There's a lot of people that are, but those that aren't, just to kind of get to know you outside of, that guy that's, flipped a company for 9 figures and, who's this guru that understands all these different aspects about culture and about gamification and making employees better and productivity up and all that good stuff. But Judge Graham, who is Judge Graham? So my first question that I always like to kind of give these rapid fire responses to: why TCU as far as the selection process for college?
Football.
Football. Okay.
Yeah.
What else were you looked at outside of TCU?
Some other small schools, but TCU
That's not a small school, but
yeah, we have other small schools, not being TCU. But don't misinterpret too, like, because it looks like I'm wearing an SMU shirt. Mm-hmm. It's not. It's my it's where my son will go to high school. It's they're Mustangs. So I just don't any Horned Frog fans out there thinking I'm disrespecting them. I'm not. So
you definitely don't want to have that going. So football was kind of your passion and kind of got you to TCU. And I've seen you talk about that and how maybe not being as good at football, but being good at other things kind of led you to the next aspect. The cowboy hat. Where did the cowboy hat mantra come from?
Yeah, I should have wore one today. I started doing some keynote speaking and some speaking, and I really believe you have to build a brand, right? And that brand has to translate tangibly, right, into the physical presence. And I said, what am I going to be, when different people get on stage? You think of like Steve Jobs started to kind of revolutionize like the jeans and the black turtleneck, right? That was kind of his thing. And I remember, I live close to Fort Worth in Texas, and we were, there's a custom hat shop in this area called the Stockyards. And I went in there and I just fell in love with the process. I mean, there's all these different felt hats and there's different, X's and quality, and there's so many different ways to shape them. And I bought my first hat, and now I'm probably, I don't know, close to 40 hats later, and it just became kind of my thing. And so anytime I'm on stage, there's definitely some sort of hat, whether it's a cowboy hat or a flat brim. But it came out of, one, I just thought they were really cool. But two, I wanted to be like, oh, man, that's the guy that wears the hat.
Well, it definitely is a memorable aspect, almost as Judge Graham Elliott is known for his glasses.
Yeah, there you go. Right.
So, and quite frankly, I was in Park City this past summer with my wife, and I didn't we went into this place called Burns's where they have they originally were doing all the Yellowstone characters' hats, and like you can get your hats branded. You get it's a next level type. I'm just a snapback guy, maybe wearing a trucker hat. In most cases, I didn't realize the entity. First of all, the expense of some of the hats out there. So I was wondering where that was and throwing it into my rapid fire questions.
Yeah, great question.
Bourbon or tequila?
Tequila.
Okay. Any specific tequila that you're going to be having?
I mean, I would say both. Unfortunately, I mean, colder months I'll do some bourbon, but I'm primarily a tequila guy. Casa Azul Reposado go to.
And I guess my last one is, what do you do when you're not doing what you do?
Yeah.
And creating environments for entrepreneurs to really kind of understand where they're going and what's going on from a work standpoint. What do you do in your free time?
Man, I'm consumed right now with just my kids and my family in a good way. So, like, both of my boys are in football. One's in it's just finishing up, but Pee Wee, and then my oldest son was in seventh grade football. Now they're migrating into basketball. So, any opportunity I get to coach and make all the games and be around them and do family trips and things of that nature. I mean, that's where I pour my time into when I'm not working.
That's awesome. So kind of getting into the nuts and bolts of things. Obviously, you've had a pretty prolific career and made some great decisions as far as, and we'll talk a little bit about your decision-making process and how making decisions is probably the fault that most entrepreneurs don't do. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But one of the big things that I think has helped a lot of businesses is relationships. And, there's an interesting statistic that says 76% of the time that you meet somebody, you'll decide if you'll have additional conversations within 30 seconds
Right.
with that individual. Okay. Well, you know what they say about salespeople is that 88% of the statistics are made up on the fly. But the reality is that we both were at Victor's event, Profit Rocket, and we had really never connected before, and probably were at a multitude of events. And we started talking for a few seconds, and I was like, this is a guy that I want to get to know. I want to understand who he is, what makes him tick. And I'm sure that you get that from a lot of different entrepreneurs. But when I heard you on stage, that's when I was like, okay, there's next level shit that's coming out as far as utilizing a lot of different things to be able to say, how can we take technology? How can we impact a lot of different businesses? But talk to the audience first and foremost, a little bit about how for you relationships are key to growing what you're doing from a business standpoint and where you're going from an entrepreneurial standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, what is the old adage? Your network is your net worth, right? Whatever your network is, because potentially your net worth. I think there's a lot of truth in that statement. And as I have matured in business, I've understood how the power of that is so important, right? I mean, based on this relationship or another relationship, it's a cheat code, right? I mean, my whole philosophy, and I've based my success on speed, right? So any time I can compress time and leapfrog something, that's a competitive advantage, right? That's my cheat code. And so if you're building a network to tap into someone who's already spent years doing something, building a network, learning cheat codes, and you can somehow bring value to that relationship and piggyback on it, that's going to compress time, and that compressing time creates momentum. That momentum creates revenue. So I think it's critical, for people to seek out those relationships, right, and figure out how you can bring value to it in a multitude of ways, right? It should be a monetary value. There should be a strategic value, but critical in success.
So you didn't just wake up one day and say, hey, I'm going to write this book called Scale with Speed. And we can talk a little more about the nature of how that book a couple of years ago when you wrote it, and now how it's propelled your career. But give our listeners a little bit of an understanding, specifically how you kind of got from playing football in college to being an owner in a business to maybe potentially being in that burning the ship type of moment, and right, saying, how do I continue to grow and being part of one of the larger CRMs out there, and just a little bit about your background.
Yeah, I think football really helped shape who I became, right? In the sense of learning leadership, teamwork, what it feels like to win, what it feels like to lose, dedication, grind, all those things. And I realized pretty quickly that the NFL wasn't in my future, and I needed to pivot, right? And at the time, what was hot was digital, right? Computer science, things of that nature. So I've always been, I thought, a pretty good salesperson. And so I said, how can I take this and start making money? And in college, I started a web design development company and grew that to like 30 or 40 people. And then just from there, just fell in love with the idea of owning businesses, selling things, scaling it, and really paid attention and took homage to the importance of people. Right.
Right.
I learned really quick that no matter how good of a salesperson I was, there's only so many hours in the day that I can sell, service, and produce a product or a service. And that scale happens with people, and profitable scale and fast scale and momentum happens with great people. And so I started to learn that lesson quickly in the importance of building growth cultures and cultivating tribal like people to have desires to follow a vision and want to win.
Yeah. It's interesting. And, we do a lot of work within the trades and helping them from a digital marketing standpoint. And, one of the things that for me about the trade aspect of life is that they're very open to sharing successes. You can call up a Tommy Mello, or you can call up a Wyatt Hepworth, or Victor Rincourt, Ishmael Valdez, Tom Howard. You pick who your guy is that you want to go, because they all have different niches about what makes them successful in their brands and in their companies. And they're like, come on in. So my kind of philosophy has been, I'm not afraid to open my doors to another digital agency. You want to come in and see what we're doing? If you can match it, great. If you do a better job from that client than I could do, then good for their business. I don't get worried about what we can and what we don't do. I worry about what we do well. And so, somebody was like, "Oh my God, you're having that guy. He's a digital expert. You're going to have him on your podcast?" And I was like, "Yeah, why wouldn't I?" It's not about the digital efforts of what his entrepreneurial aspect is. It's about the fact is he's growing businesses at an alarming rate. Why wouldn't I want to share that with our customers?
For sure.
And so people are so insecure, at least in the digital space, and we don't open our doors as effectively because, oh my God, is Judge going to take your client? No, Judge is not worried about the HVAC company in, Tampa, Florida right now. He's worried about how does he utilize his products outside of digital support that. So, talk to me a little bit about just kind of speed for scale and really kind of how that came into play, and as far as what you're kind of doing right now.
Yeah, when you think about a day and the lack of productivity that happens in that day, how many times do you call meetings to only have that meeting be an update about something that was supposed to be done 2 or 3 weeks ago, right? So I understood the power of speed when I started taking massive action, right? So let's say that somebody, let's use websites as an example. Hey, we've got to update our website because we're going to do a marketing campaign or whatever. Like, instead of us talking about who's going to work on it, how are we going to get it done, what's the timeline, when can we see the logo, whatever, I would just assimilate the team, put them in a conference room, and start cranking, right? You're building code, you build the logo, give me 3 options in the next 15 minutes. I'm picking an option, go grab, imagery, let's put it together, and let's ship the product, right? Let's launch it. Because taking action in anything in life forces momentum to create, right? And I talk about momentum so much because once you're in it, it gets completed. But if you never take that initial action to get going, you're just at a stalemate. And I learned that my ability to make decisions versus my competitors and move at the speed I was moving, it allowed me, even if I was making 20-30% error on some of those decisions, I was 10, 12, 20xing the amount of decisions and the pace that I was moving, that you just create separation. And so, a lot of people that tell you a lot of times will say, well, that's not strategic. If you move too fast, you can make bad decisions. You just have to have the right framework and the right mindset, and you've got to have the discipline to understand how to operate at speed. There's the saying all the time. It's like, hey, everybody slow down. Life or business it's a marathon. It's not a race. I hate that saying, right? Because the only thing we have in life, that the most precious commodity, is time. Okay. So why would I want to be in a business any longer than I need to be to cross the finish line, right? Whether that's a cash flow milestone I want or it's an exit I want, right? Because my time is the most valuable. So I look at everything and how fast, how everything to me is a sprint, right? With a clear finish line based on a date.
It's interesting. I saw a recent article from Elon, and they say, hey, you're running these $3 billion businesses. Now you got Twitter and, what's going on in your life that you can be able to manage all that. And he says, I manage my time. My time is the aspect of what makes me successful. It drives me nuts when I have people that will drop a calendar appointment for a meeting into my calendar, and they block off an hour for a 6-minute meeting. Like,
Sure.
I'm sending back to them and saying, do we really need an hour? And then, so I've conditioned a lot of people to say, no, we really only need 15 minutes. So how many hour meetings do you put on your calendar through the course of a day when you really need 5 to 10 to 15 to figure out what's going on? And making those decisions is really critical. It's funny is that you got to meet Lance while we were kind of touring around, and Lance wears, literally, when I tell you, the same shirt, the same jeans.
Yeah.
Now, he might have 10 pairs of those jeans. He has 10 pairs or 10 of those shirts, the same boxers, because he doesn't want to have to waste the time in the morning when you're running larger scale company to make a decision on what am I going to wear? That's why, like me, I'm black polo shirt, jeans every day. I call it the Tommy Mello uniform. Because you're never going to see Tommy out of an A1 shirt or specifically jeans. He might be wearing shorts when it's 115 degrees, but it's really about managing your time, I think, is the motto there.
Yeah, managing your time. And then I think the other key thing is learning to become very intentional and direct. So if you want to manage and optimize time, you've got to be very intentional with the time and very direct on how you use that time. I mean, so many of us skirt around topics, or you don't want to be direct because you feel it's inappropriate or whatever, but there's an art in that, right? Like, hey, here, let's be intentional and let's be direct, because if we're not, we're not, we're wasting time.
Outstanding. You talked a lot about making decisions fast. And most people, I don't think, can comprehend what you mean by that, because they're so scared of making the decision that they almost cripple themselves by paralysis, by analysis of trying to make it. Can you talk a little bit about how maybe the entrepreneur should get past that as far as making that decision?
Yeah, and you mentioned it. I've got a whole chapter in my book on how to make decisions, right? And so I view almost 90% of your decisions you should be able to make instantly, right? And you are, right? I mean, there's probably 20 to 30,000 of decisions happen every day, right? Should I answer this call? Should I brush my teeth? Should I, wear a hat? I mean, there's all these things happening. So 90+% are just kind of natural and instant, right? And then these other 10 to 5%, people freeze, right? They get scared, they procrastinate it, right? And the way I look at it is, if you have the data to make the decision, just make it, right? And unless it's going to harm your life or have huge financial ramifications, then go get more data. But most people just stop, right? They stop at that, and they won't take the next step required to get the data quickly to make the decision. They would rather just have it linger, right? And so for me, I just want to arm myself as quickly as possible with what pieces of data do I need to make an informed decision. And even things that are difficult, I just look at it and go, what's the worst case scenario, right? If I'm not going to die here and I'm not going to lose, X amount of money, then just live with the outcome. Because again, it's about the amount of decisions you make to create the momentum. And if you're making a whole lot of them, you have a room for error, right? You can pivot. It's the people that don't make the decisions, right? That procrastinate and just, they worry too much about it being perfect. And, there is no sense of perfect, right? You need to launch it and get feedback and test it and use it and continue.
Yeah, it's that indecision making process is probably, I think, one of the things that, oh my gosh, I'm hemming and hawing about like this. And quite frankly, those are the clients I don't want.
Sure.
As
Yeah.
much as I want to gain revenue, I know what's going to happen in that first 90 to 120 days. You're going to think of this is the end all be all as far as where all of your revenue is to grow your business. And, I had a guy say to me yesterday, hey, the dollar value that you put out is too high. I have sticker shock. And I said, no, the revenue that I put out as far as what you need for your marketing allocation is based upon what the revenue is that you told me that you want to grow your business to.
Right.
I said, I think you need to go back and reevaluate. Can you really grow to this number? Are your technicians, do you have the hiring capabilities? Do you have the logistics in place? It's not just one decision about generating leads. It's
Right.
about all the other decisions that come across upon that. Um, you know, Talk a little bit about the money sheet if you can, because I think it's an important thing that you obviously have on your site as a free tool,
Yeah.
but how people can utilize that in their lives.
Yeah. We tend not to focus on the things that are closest to generating revenue, right? And that's just because they're harder things usually, right? So the money sheet is a concept that I came up with that said, okay, what are the 6 to 8 things today that get me closest to generating revenue, right? Today, right? So not a month out, not 2 months, not a week, because a lot of times we fool ourselves into working on activities that are going, oh, well, this is going to help, 3 weeks from now or 2 weeks from now. So it's a mental challenge to really say, all right, whether I'm working 24 hours today or 5 hours today, what are the 6 to 8 things today that are revenue generating activities I need to accomplish? Not to dos, not, hey, I'm going to get on social and make a post like that get us to revenue, right? I got to make 60 phone calls to get X amount of demos. Those demos will convert at X percentage, activities that get you closer to revenue that day. And that's what the money sheet is, right? It's not a to-do list. And, I would look at people and say, what are we doing today? And every time it's this very non-win or lose task that's very nebulous that really has no impact at the end of the day. And so the money sheet allows you when you go to bed to go, did I win or lose today? Right? Did I accomplish those 6 to 8 and did it generate me revenue? Or for sure, there's an indicator that I got closer. And it's more of a mindset of how you do it.
Yeah, it's interesting because when a couple of years ago, when I like to call it March 12th COVID day, when the majority of the country and your neck of the woods wasn't as crazy as our neck of the woods, decided to shut down, Lance came to us and said, listen, here's two things I want everybody to be thinking about. Number one is we're going to be okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Number two is if it doesn't impact generating revenue or retaining revenue, we're not doing it. Like
Yeah.
we're
Smart.
throwing it out the window.
Yeah.
And those two principles will do everything you need if it affects the top line and how it affects profitability. Because at the end of the day, you can have, I've seen so many home service based businesses that are doing 30, 35 million, but running at 3%
Yeah. Margin. Yeah.
margins. And I'm just like, I'd rather have a $5 million company producing
Sure. 20,
20,
30.
25% than having, because as you scale, and maybe you could talk about this a little bit, as you scale, the headaches don't get more, they just get multiplied. You're going to have the same HR issues. You're going to have the same logistic issues. Maybe you can talk about that as you scale the business, because I think that's a big thing, especially now, because either people are going to do one of two things from our vantage point is, people pull back of where they seeing interest rates go, the looming recession, red wave didn't happen. You pick what they want from a political standpoint. At the end of the day, businesses are going to forge forward or they're going to fall back. And those that fall back are going to get swallowed up by the PE firms. So, because it's easy money for them and it's
Yeah.
easy to get out of. So talk about like when you're scaling, how do you manage those things?
I think you brought up the biggest thing. My previous business partner was amazing at finance. And the easy indicator to manage that is what margin do you want, right? If you hold yourself to a standard of a certain margin, that allows you to scale properly, right? Because a lot of the times business owners will get enamored with growth and they get very confused with revenue and growth versus profitability. And to your point, profitability, EBITDA, margin, net profit, whatever word you want to use, that's the lever you need to be thinking about. Okay, so growth at scale, you have to maintain those margins as best as possible. Now, when you're smaller, typically the margin in theory will be much bigger, but at some point, there's no reason having a business get bigger if you can't withstand a 15% at a minimum. To me, I mean, I like companies that are more 35 to 45, 50% margin type companies, and then you just build around that.
I spent prior to getting into digital marketing and sales, I was in the restaurant business for close to 12 years. And that's one from the margin numbers you want to stay away from. But
Sure.
the one thing that I learned about operating a P&L and really understanding how a P&L works is that you get to a point in your revenue. And I don't think this is where people truly understand in their business of that job costing of saying, hey, if I hit this in revenue, everything else flows straight through down.
Sure. Yeah.
Once they get to that particular level. And so that's where I think that you have to understand what your niche is. And
Yeah.
you talk a lot about having a niche as far as with regards to a business. Thoughts on being specified in what you do?
Yeah, it's huge. I use the saying all the time, niche will get you rich, right? So I use the term inch wide, mile deep, right? When
Yeah.
you're an inch wide and you're a mile deep, you can hire the best talent, right? You have less processes. You can create higher margins. You can be more intentional with your outreach and your marketing and your sales. You have a deeper capability as it relates to what specifically you do, right? You have more case studies. You have more client successes. Selling becomes easier. Everything becomes easier. And the biggest piece of that is margin increase, right? I use the example all the time. Why does a general practitioner make 200,000 and a brain surgeon make 800,000? Because it's niche, right? I mean, I'm not coming to you for a broken arm, a common cough, COVID, flu, and he or she is having to understand all those things and have processes for all those and different types of medication. Where a brain surgeon does one thing and they do it really well and they have a premium of what they do, and they probably have less stress, work less, and make more money.
You've gained all this insight. You're understanding how businesses kind of talk a little bit how that parlayed you into carrots and then cues as far as what you have going on, because I really want to make sure that, and this was the part about your presentation at the whole gamification of understanding, you said something that was wildly impactful to me. Okay. And that was, you talked about giving cash is not what people want because they see that incremental cash just going out the window. They're not
Sure.
going to give it for themselves to go buy that new pair of sneakers. Tell me how you took that simple principle, used technology, and brought it to fruition.
Yeah. So, kind of early into post COVID, the world changed, right? Everything changed on how people view work life balance, how they view work, how they view time. All those things changed. And my business partner in this business and I got together and said, what do we tribute our success to? People, culture, growth, building a growth culture. So we said, well, how do we take that to verticals, niches, home service, auto, whatever, and provide technology at scale to help create these growth environments? And that's the evolution of carrots and now into cues. And so, things that are critical are, creating a winning organization, a winning mindset, right? Creating leaderboards, competitions, rewarding people and recognizing them in the moments that matter, right? Those things are so critical, public praise, right? All those things. And managers in that growth trajectory or owners, those things become secondary whether they know it or not, because they're not things that are typically hitting the P&L, right? When you're in this trajectory, everything is about sales and delivery, right? Sales,
Right.
delivery, service. And your people at that point become just byproducts of that mission. But the smart operators and owners understand that it's the people that really drive that. And if you're not doing the things to make sure they understand goals, pacing, tracking, publicly praising them, creating an environment that has competition, recognizing them the moments that matter, and rewarding them, that trajectory just goes backwards. And so that's why we invented cues. Is we create on a simple application, we become your probably best employee, because we're going to help you easily manage culture through queuing you in on the moments that matter to your employees, queuing you in on the moments that matter to your business, and making you focus on the things that you typically want to focus on, which are revenue and service.
Do you utilize another CRM to integrate with regards to what you're doing with cues?
Yeah, what's great about this software is we made a conscious decision that we wanted a really no training software. So our software is all about consumption and gamification, and we connect into the CRM. So the CRM is the source of truth. It's the most utilized thing in a business that's collecting data, tracking data, and all the things. It's kind of the brain of the company. And we just pull in all the information from that CRM, and we gamify it, and we create notifications around it, and we create moments that matter around that data that's already being inputted.
I would assume that it works on all major CRMs, Service Titan, House Call Pros, Salesforce, HubSpot, you pretty much name it. The integration is there.
Yep. Yeah. It's simple API, right? So if any CRM that's out there that has an open API, which 99% of them all do, at least probably the clients that we want to work are using those. It's literally a couple clicks. We typically have clients up within 24 to 48 hours. So,
one of the things that people, and maybe that you kind of just alluded to this, so pardon my question for a second. The biggest thing that people despise, they see the value. Okay. They see the value of what you're saying. However, they don't have the technology set to onboard. There are different CRMs. I can tell you personally, when we have a sister company, it's a technology company, managed IT services called Shock IT. And long story short, we decided to do our own Salesforce implementation. Well, you never go look at the guy
right.
whose lawn you're going to have cut your lawn, because he's busy cutting everybody else's lawn.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So we suffered for a good 6 months trying to implement, because we're doing all these other people's work versus doing our own. And so finally we said, let's outsource it. Let's take it specifically out and have a company that is predominantly great at Salesforce implementation. And it changed the way that we utilize Salesforce reporting just across the board. How is Q's? Is it easy to onboard?
For sure. I mean, it literally is 24 to 48 hours. I mean, what's great about it is it just connects to the CRM. So there's no training, right? We work with the owner, the operator, the manager to understand, what kind of contest do you want to run? What kind of things do you want to be notified on? We seamlessly pull in people's birthdays, their work anniversaries, when they cross their best day, when they beat a goal, because all of that's being tracked already in the CRM. Right. So we utilize data that exists, and we just create thresholds, notifications, contests, gamify it through leaderboards, and tie it to gift cards as well as killer incentives. And we make all of that very seamless and painless. Right. We really pride ourselves on a no training software, because I understand the last thing we wanted when you say, hey, I got software and we're going to sell it. Nobody wants it because of the pain. Nobody wants it because of the implementation. And so, again, like I said, that was a very conscious decision that we were not going to create something that required a huge department to train or service or burden that operator from taking them away from the activities that generate revenue.
How does it interline with the social media for the company, that type of thing? Is it something that it does have a push notification type of aspect that, hey, it's XYZ birthday, let me just, because it comes in through queues, it gets fed through your social media channels?
Yeah, it pops up on the app, and there's permission levels, right? But it's real seamless, and we also try to not burden people with a bunch of communication, right? We really were intentional on moments that matter, right? Because the other thing is we have so many distractions, right? Things are always popping up, Twitter, Slack, Salesforce, whatever it is, and so we're very intentional on when we cue you in on something, right? So it's something that matters to the employee, or it's something that matters to your business. So to give you a great example, operators are overwhelmed with data. Service Titan will give you any data you want and confuse the hell out of you and overlay things. But really, at the end of the day, there's probably 6 to 8 things that are real key levers for operators. And we help them in the day get a cue or a notification on thresholds like, hey, I don't ever care about my revenue unless it's above or below this number, right? I care anytime it's my employee's birthday, their work anniversary, or they cross a goal because I want to recognize them in that moment, right? I care anytime I get a 4.5 on Google or below, right? And so we were very intentional with those operators and managers on what do you care about? What are the levers you actually need to know about to take action on that'll improve your culture or improve your bottom line in your business? Besides that, we don't just constantly inundate you with things because you're already being annoyed by a lot of stuff and data that doesn't matter, right? We want to make it very intentional. And I think that's been a big success for us.
How knowing those factors which you've built the system around, I'm sure you got some increases in performance and decreases in employee turnover that come across on that. Is those the major metrics that you see? Employee performance, revenue, close rates, et cetera. And then obviously much more on the employee satisfaction, almost like having a 10.0 on a net promoter scale all the time.
Sure. Yeah, we were actually going to create, and we still make kind of like our version of an employee score and a net promoter score. But ultimately, it's so tough in business to attribute one thing to everything, right?
Multiple touch points.
Now we've done some statistical analysis and studies on customers that have been with us 6 to 12 months, and the results are good. But I don't want to take credit for a 20%, 30% increase in revenue. We're definitely a factor in that, right? I mean, if you have a more engaged workforce, the byproduct, whether you can physically see it and track it on the P&L, exists, right? And I talked a lot about that in the presentation. But the one that's the easiest to attribute and track to us is attrition, right? It's an employee turnover and attriting. And so we're definitely seeing those numbers, right? Of the employees you want to keep, right? Retaining that top talent, right? This is a tool that's super cost effective that allows you to retain that top talent. And, we did a national study and have, factual data. On average, it costs about $60,000 to replace an employee. You're in Philadelphia, if you're in New York, if you're on the West Coast, it's probably higher than that, depending on the position.
Yep.
If we're talking technicians, it could be significantly higher than that. And so we look at it as, if we were able to help just retain one top talent, we 1000x have an ROI, right? So that's the real measurement, but you get byproducts in engagement and revenue for sure.
We like to do one thing here in the den. We call it the final roar. I think it originated from the Springer show and the final thought.
Love that.
So, the aspect here for us is to understand there's one thing that you can give to the guy that's the next guy, the next Tommy Mello, the next Victor Rencourt, the next Ishmael Valdez, next Tom Howard. What's that one thing you're going to tell them? Because obviously they can't do it alone. Okay. You can only influence as you grow so many people. I get to influence about 4. My team gets to influence 30. They get to influence another 300. What's the thing you're going to say to that entrepreneur saying, man, this is what you can truly influence. and here's how you can do it in an effective manner.
Yeah, it's core values. I mean, it's really, and this is such a great thing about a free enterprise and for profit and business and being an entrepreneur. I always tell the leader or the owner, what culture do you want? What habits and behaviors do you want? Right? Like me, I'm speed. That's one of them. So it's such an opportunity for the owner or the operator to build an organization around the habits and behaviors that they want, that they believe will become successful. And it's their job to instill that tribalism, right? Because if you all of a sudden have like-minded people that have the same mindset, the same habits, and the daily behaviors that we're all aligned with, it makes it so much easier to execute the vision. It makes it so much easier to have tough conversations. It makes it so much easier to hit the goals, right? And that would be the one piece of advice, because so many owners and operators don't pay homage or take enough time to really understand the power of core values. Besides words on a wall, implementing behaviors, mindsets, and daily habits, and creating a tribal like community that are all driven around that.
Well, listen, first and foremost, I want to tell you how much I appreciate you being on the Den today. I love when I get to hear people's thoughts of what's made them successful, and they're willing to share, truly share the things that have helped them get to where it is. You didn't get to where you are without somebody helping you along the way. And, there's just some really great people in this space that are willing to share. As far as finding out more about Q's, where's the best place that could people find out about how they can implement it, getting a demo? Where would you tell them to turn?
Easiest thing, go to getcues, GETCUES.com. Set up a demo. Whoever pops up on that demo, we'll give a special offer to anybody a part of one SEO.
Perfect.
So would love that. So just, it's easiest way, getcues.com.
All right. And then in addition to that, I know that you do a lot of communication with organizations. If somebody wanted to get in touch with Judge Graham, I'd assume judgegraham.com is the best place for them to reach out to you as far as maybe a speaking engagement, whether it's coming and talking to their 150 to 200 technicians, whatever it might be. That's the best place for you.
Yeah, judgegraham.com. Happy to connect there from, anything I can bring value with.
Well, listen, I truly appreciate the time that we spent together today. I think that there's definitely some great insight that you've given our listeners to how they can increase employee retention, increase productivity by looking at Q's as a method to do that, and get it at getqs.com, and just overall what you bring as far as making decisions. I heard Ishmael say multiple times, the way that he got his business to scale and where he was is by making decisions. And I just said to somebody the other day, I'm like, make the decision. We're a month to month. What do you have to lose? Make it.
That's it. Yeah. And just know that those decisions are not fatal. As long as they're not fatal, it doesn't matter. And that's the thing, when you look at the greatest, like Michael Jordan, he's missed more shots than he's made. Right. But he was making the decision to take action, right? Making the decision to take action and knowing that he could potentially fail. That's where success happens.
Well, listen, I appreciate your time. We look forward to seeing you at some of the different shows that we're going to. If anybody has any questions, please reach out to me directly. Shoot me an email, and I'll get you in touch with Judge and his team at getqs.com to be able to hear about how you can better make your employees happy and more productive. Thanks very much, Judge.
Appreciate me having me on.
Okay, bye-bye.